Now, is Jesus saying don't be successful? No. Jesus is just saying don't confuse money and tasks with success. Make your impact on people the measurement of your success in life. Number one, you have to break up your paths. Break up your paths. Jesus starts off this parable. He says there's a path. Sower goes out to sow. You've got to understand the background that Jesus is working with. When we think of a farmer going out to sow seed in a field, we think of the picture that's been behind me. We think of a Kansas field, and we go, I don't, what? Jesus, 5 years ago, had the privilege of going to Nazareth, Israel, where Jesus grew up. I've got a picture here of where they found the threshing floor. This was quite literally where Jesus would have gathered and threshed the wheat of his day. And as you can see, there's kind of a terraced farming. And so when I saw this, I went, this is what Jesus had in mind. This was when he told this parable. This is what he's thinking. There's this terraced area that people walked all over the time. And what would happen is there would be a path. And so a little bit later in Matthew 13, Jesus explains the parable. I want to give you the explanations one at a time here. Matthew chapter 13, verse 19. When anyone here's Jesus explaining what the path is. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. What's a path? A path is a shortcut. It's when you and we say, I'm going to try and make life work for me, and I'm going to take a shortcut. I've got a picture here of this. You see that behind me is a sidewalk. And you can see that people didn't want to walk on the sidewalk. They wanted the shortest distance between 2 points. Do you know there's actually, I didn't know this, there is a name for this. There's an archaeological feature that people who design things, they describe this. You know what they call it? A desire path. In other words, the purpose of your life becomes focused on current satisfaction. You're not focused on the field. You're not focused on the fruit of the field. You're like, I got to go somewhere else. And you're focused on where you're going at that moment. And here's what happens. That path, those repeated things, that's how you get a path, right? You just repeat it. You repeat those actions. You repeat those steps. And paths become habits that becomes patterns that become ruts. I've got a picture here of the wagon ruts. So many times the wagons from the Oregon Trail went over this stone that it made ruts, because that's the power of repeated. I'll do it again and again. You get stuck in a rut. The other day, I was at the corner of a street in my town, and someone was in my way, and I was trying to turn right, and I thought I had enough room, and so don't tell my wife that I'm telling this story. She's hearing it for the first time. And I thought, I'm going to go right over this person, and I went over the person, and I didn't see there's literally a rut down in there. I think the city does it to get people like me. And they did. I got stuck in this rut, and I couldn't make the car go. And I spun the wheels. It was spewing up mud everywhere. My oldest son, who was here at home for spring break, got out, and he said, hey, there was a guy behind us filming you. And I just waved at him and went, I'm like, oh, great, my son threw me under the bus. Thanks a lot for that. I was stuck. I was stuck in a rut. I couldn't get out of that rut. When you have a path, that's what happens, is you just get stuck in a rut. Now, the Bible has a lot of language for describing the kind of life you live if you are stuck in a rut, if you don't bother to break up your paths. Proverbs says you'll be what's called a fool, meaning a fool is a person in Proverbs who won't listen and so won't learn. They just repeat the same thing over again, and they make the same mistakes, and they can't figure out why. And they're just focused on some other place, so they're not really paying attention. The Apostle Paul calls it living according to the flesh, living according to how you feel at that current moment. I've got to have my satisfaction for what I feel right now. Jesus here, another F here, fiend, right? He says that this person who has just paths, that they don't pay attention to their life, they just want to get where they're going, it's a desire path. He said that person, there's no ability for roots to go down, so the fiend, Satan, comes. In the parable, it's the bird, comes and takes the good, steals it out of their heart and life. A path is when you live with no purpose. What do you do to break up your path? I want to point out to you what Hosea, the prophet, said in Hosea chapter 10 in the Old Testament. Listen to what he says. Sow righteousness for yourselves, reap the fruit of unfailing love, and what? Break up your unplowed ground. Have you ever gone out to unplowed ground? I'm not a farmer. I have family who are farmers, but I didn't, do the whole big. But I've gone out into the little garden area, and tried to break up the ground and rented the tiller. Anyone else rented a tiller? Those things are a beast. I got one that was too small last year, and it didn't work, didn't break anything up. Then I got one that was too big, and I just about dug up my entire yard because it got away from me. Here's what's happened when you have a path, is you've literally bypassed the field, the place of growth and fruit in your life. And what you have to do is you have to turn your path into a field. Let me give you 3 questions that will help you with that if you want to break up your path. Number 1, don't stop till you get the answers to these questions. Who is it that I'm supposed to be? A person that just gives themselves to paths has never paused to ask, now, what am I for exactly? Who is it that I'm supposed to be? Then you have to ask, okay, well, who is God? Who is God to me? And then who is it that I am influencing? Don't let up until you have an answer to those questions. Break up your paths. Number 2, you have to dig out your rocks. Dig out your rocks. Jesus says this in verse 20. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. So when trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. What are rocks? Rocks they're your issues. The roots can't go down because there's something in the way, and it's your issues that loom largest. It's character issues, it's relational issues, it's heart issues. And because of that, you don't mean it this way. You wouldn't even maybe call yourself this kind of a person. Because of these issues in your life that you've never dug out or spent the time to figure out why they're there, you basically live on the surface of your life. Because your issues take all of your time. Jelly roll again. My life is a crapshoot. I'm just shaking the dice. I can't figure out why this keeps happening. And the irony is that if you don't deal with your issues, that's how they win. Either by existing and you not noticing that they're there, or by you noticing that they're there but saying, I don't know what to do about it. And so what happens is you live with survival as your purpose. How do you dig out your rocks? Well, I don't know any other way to do this due to the blindness of our humanity other than to simply just ask for help. You can almost never see your issues alone. Do you live with anybody who has issues that they can't see? Don't raise your hand, but just like they've got issues, but they don't know they've got issues. Any parents of teenagers, you want to... Why is that? It's a feature of the human condition when we're not paying attention, is we have issues. Everybody else can see our issues, and we can't. And so what happens is when you find a trusted friend, because a real friend will help you remove your rocks without judging you for having the rocks, your friend becomes like a fulcrum that you, with God's help, the lever of your life, you're able to lift the rock out. That's why James, in James chapter 5, says that when you really have community, thick community, and understand the gospel, you can confess your sins to one another, and you can pray for one another so that you can be healed. Why? Because your friend helps you remove the issues. Oh, that's a character issue. Oh, that's a heart issue. Oh, that's a relational issue. Let's move it. Let's remove it together. You got to dig out your rocks. Number 3 is you got to burn your thorns. Burn your thorns. Verse 22, Jesus says, the seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. What are the thorns? The thorns are the cares of this life, added together with thinking it's all about money, becomes such a piece of noise in your frame of reference that you become too busy to be bothered by the fact that you have a soul. So here's what happens. You live with success, at least as it's defined in our culture today, as your purpose. And here's what Jesus says about that. Jesus says the way the culture defines success, I've got all these cares, all these things to worry about. I've got all this money I'm worrying about. He says what that does is it chokes out life and purpose. Because you can have, see, here's the trick. You can have a lot of things, you can have a lot of experiences, you can accumulate a lot of things and experiences, and because that's what our culture measures, you can feel successful, but you need to hear the word of Jesus from God, the giver of purpose, the understander of what purpose actually is that the way our culture defines successful is not fruitful. I repeatedly tell you about the box test. In the box test, those of you who know, is you're going to, at some point in your life, you're going to be in the box, in a room like this. People are going to get up and they're going to say things about you. What are they going to say about you? You know, the real answer for the box test is not what other people say about you, though you want people to say wonderful things about you. The person's answer that matters when you're in the box is God's. That's the opinion that matters. It's wonderful when people say good things about you, but what does God say about you? Did you live a successful life or did you live a fruitful life? Now, is Jesus saying don't be successful? No. Jesus is just saying don't confuse money and tasks with success. Make your impact on people the measurement of your success in life. How do you burn the thorns? Let me give you one of Jesus' famous verses about burning the thorns in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Here's what he says. No one, turn to your neighbor and say, it's talking about you. No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus is not saying you cannot have both God and money. That's not what Jesus says. You cannot serve both God and money. Some friends of mine gave me this way of thinking about this that I'd never really considered before. They're called the 5 capitals. If you've been around for a while, you've heard me talk about the 5 capitals. But the 5 capitals are financial. It's the coinage that we use to spend in our culture, the different kinds of coinage that we spend. There's financial capital, there's intellectual capital, there's physical capital, there's relational capital, there's spiritual capital. And the way the kingdom of the world works, the way we define success is, you win the game when you have a lot of financial capital. That's how you win. Those are the winners. And then it's the intellectual capital. It's how smart are you? Where's your degree from? How many degrees do you have? What have you written? Where do you speak? How thoughtful are you? Then it's the physical capital, like how good looking are you? Are you in shape or out of shape? Then it gets into and you have relationships, and that's good, right? You're going to be married and maybe have a few kids, and that's good. And then it's nice if the kingdom of the world works this way, because financial capital is ultimate. It's nice if you're isn't that nice? How nice of you to be a spiritual person. Isn't that sweet that you're spiritual and you go to church? That's the kingdom of this world. It works that way. The reason it gets us confused is because these are the same things, but the kingdom of heaven works the opposite way. Jesus says the most important thing about you is the relationship you have with God. It's the spiritual capital you have. And then the next most important thing is who you're related to, because the purpose of life, Jesus says, is to love God and to love people. It's relational capital. Then it's how much energy do you have that you can use in service of God's purposes. And then it's what do you know and where have you been and what degrees do you have and how smart are you. And then your financial capital is nothing more than a way to serve the purposes of God. Are you following what I'm saying? How you burn the thorns is you reorder the important.